Hi, everyone. It's Grant speaking, and also Ben Gill in the lovely Gold Coast. How are you going, Ben?
Very good. I'm exhausted after being on the road with you for the last 3 weeks. So we just finished
Yeah,
up.
look, it was fantastic to get to the SMSF Association conference. A bit disappointing they didn't want me to speak, but, I'm not a very good speaker, so I get very embarrassed and shy when I'm on stage. But what I've got is, and blow me down, right in the midst of the conference, what happens? Labor decides to come out with its policy, and I've had a look at the Treasury. So we're going to spend, instead of these going to be all my strategies from that you won't see, and I'll be taking you through those a little bit later on. I want to really just give you a big context of what's going on, but more importantly, I want to make sure that you've got solutions from today. So I'm going to give you some solutions today of what to do, but more importantly, some strategies for year end and things that we've got to look at. So it's going to be pretty jam-packed. Again, I'm going to go pretty quickly, but just bear in mind that, of course, that it's being recorded and the slides will be there for you as well. And you get one CPD point on top of that. Okay, so let's have a look at the next slide here is just a LightYear training group. This has now been spun off. I'm the CEO of LightYear Training. Michael Jeffries is the CEO of LightYear Docs. You can see here we've got a whole lot of courses. One thing that I definitely, if you can put your hand up, and Ben will talk about a little bit later on, but the SAPEPAA, the Succession Asset Protection Estate Planning Advisors Association. I'll talk a bit about that, but that's an SMSF or self-managed super fund is an absolutely integral part of that complex SAPEPAA side. If you want to become an accredited advisor and more importantly, a board certified advisor under the SAPEPAA Association, we've now got 200 members. It's not the 13th of March. We've actually deferred it because we'll be going live in April with that course, and that will also be streamed across Australia. For those of you who you're going to see when we go through, if you want to do an advanced estate planning course with me, you can see there, but just jump onto the LightYear training courses. We're also doing an Australian first and having badges for courses as well. So, for example, on our system, we've got a 3-hour SMSF 101. So people who complete that will get a badge as an accredited SMSF generalist. So let's go on. I've been, many of you know that I have been around in SMSFs right from 1990, in fact, 1992, believe it or not. I made submissions when they came out with the Superannuation Industry Supervision Bill. It was even before that. I started doing super way back in 1986 with the Occupational Superannuation Standards Act. It's been, a very big part of my life for such a long time, although I have to put my hand on my heart, and I did call it in 2015 and said, look, this was the absolute best it will ever get in terms of concessions, what we could and couldn't do. I mean, virtually we had, tax-free super, we had quite sizable concessional contributions we could make in. We also had the ability, obviously, with LRBAs, and everything was going well. And then the conservative side, which you would never expect, Morrison came in and increased the tax essentially to 15% on any amounts that were sitting in the pension account that were in excess of $1.6 million. I threw my hands up at that time and just said, look, one, this is retrospective because it applies in the past. Secondly, for a Conservative government to put this in play was abhorrent as far as I could see. And then that suddenly meant that for a lot of our clients who had or more than $1.6 million inside the fund that wasn't relevant to pensions, it ended up back on the accumulation side where it was taxed at 15%. And of course, there's a 33.33% discount for capital gains. Now, what we're doing is obviously that's now to have another branch on top of it. And it actually reminds me of when I first started in the tax section at KPMG. One of many of my clients were actually life insurance companies, and they had 3 different sets of accounts in the life insurance company. They had their ordinary taxation, which would be 30 or whatever the company tax rate is. So at the moment it'd be 30%. They had their superannuation, so that amount that related to superannuation, which is essentially accumulation, that was at 15%. And then they had the pension or their annuity business which is effectively tax-free. So out of this system, we're going to, and I want to go through it, we're going to end up more akin with a life insurance style system, where we're going to have 3 different bands of taxation inside the fund, a 0, a 15 and a 30. And that is just going to be confusing. So obviously we're going to have to wait and see what the final legislation is. I want to talk about that a little bit later on, but it means the administrators are going to be, obviously it's going to be create a big drama for anyone who's got more than $3 million balances. And it's not just in one fund, it's across a multitude of funds. So it's all going to be assessed by the Australian Taxation Office. From that point in time, valuations are going to be crucial. And it's quite interesting because this just doesn't apply to SMSFs, although it's pretty well targeted that. It also applies for those balances in industry and retail funds that are above $3 million. And that's going to be an interesting one as well, because how do we know? I mean, we have to do valuations each and every year inside SMSFs. But if you have a look at the industry and retail funds, their valuations aren't always kept up to date. Many of them have got properties that haven't been revalued for quite some time, particularly when you have a look at the significant occupancy rates of Melbourne CBD, Sydney CBD as well. So, their balances are quite significant, which is quite interesting. The other side of the coin is one of the areas that we will pick up is that's going to make a little difference for us from an admin point of view. The balances in industry retail funds actually have accrued tax liabilities in them. So their unit pricing, or the members' unit pricing, is less than it would be in a self-managed super fund because we don't accrue for tax. Now, obviously, if we go down to this area where we are going to be looking at accruals tax on the difference between 1 year and the next, then we're going to have to start withdrawing. We're going to have to make provision for taxation against member balances, much the same as we have in industry funds. And why do I say that? Again, it's just going to have to be a duty of care that we owe to our client, that if industry and retail funds are doing that and that gives a lesser result than us, then we're going to need to do it as well. So my perspective is, I was extremely distressed at the time when Morrison brought that in, but our whole industry just didn't even say anything. I mean, it was extremely lukewarm. But as I said, I called it in 2015, 2016, it was game on. So if that was a pro-SMSF government, supposedly, what do you expect? I mean, at the end of the day, having worked a lot with the industry funds, et cetera, right from the start, what they do is each of the funds generally will get services provided by industry fund services, which can either be internally or through industry fund services. They will provide the investment performance, the administration, the platform, so on and so forth. A fee will be paid from the industry fund or even to a retail fund to that industry fund services. Now, industry fund services is actually owned by the union. And from that perspective is then those unions will then use that money to obviously fund or contribute to the Australian Labor Party. So there's a huge incentive that to say Labor is very pro-industry super funds is probably, do you know what I mean? It's just watering things down. I mean, they're really big. I wanted to show you this just quickly to show you where we're going, because I don't think this is going to be the end of the ball game. There's not a huge amount here. I think the main thing is if we have a look over here, self-managed superannuation funds. You've got small APRA funds, but they're neither here nor there. There's around about $865 billion. This was from ASFA, the November 2022 stats, so they're fairly new. $865 billion, but look at industry funds there, over $1 trillion. So they've really picked up over the last 4 or 5 years. Now, of course, there's been a pretty good market to pick it up as well. Once the market starts to drop down, you'll find that, as we found in 2000 and 2008, there's a big switcheroo to self-managed super funds, particularly from the millennials and the Gen Xers. So what we've got there, but look at the member balances, quite significant there. When we have a look at the next slide here, which is fairly important, if we have a look at where we're going to, so By 2025, we're going to be up around about $3.5 to $4.5 trillion. 2040, it's going to be $9 trillion and $10 trillion. So if we look at SMSFs all being the same in terms of percentages, that means by that stage, we're going to be up around about the $2.5 to $3 trillion mark, probably the $2 to $2.5 trillion mark. So it's going to be sizable. But the Labor government, which I think is going to be in for at least 2 terms, maybe even 3, who knows? But don't listen to me. I have no idea on politics. When you have a look at that, they're going to obviously push as hard as they can from industry. So when we have a look at industry funds up that $9 trillion, they're going to be looking after around about $3.5 to $4 trillion, at least $4 trillion of that. And that's a huge amount of union power. And hats off to Paul Keating, who realised way back in 1994 that at that stage, effectively union power is being diminished. And even now, I think 17% of Australian workforce is unionised, but unions now have a huge amount of power through the wealth and the combined size of SGC, which is going up to 12% very shortly. Okay, so I want to give you a big context around self-managed super funds. As I said, I'm the chair of the Succession Asset Protection Estate Planning Advisors Association. So SMSF is in my blood, but I'm going to show you it's only one small portion. We need to have a look at the big picture, and this is the one that we should all be grossly concerned about. I'm part of that baby boom generation. I'm sure everyone calls me a boomer, but we had a very lucky, a charmed life, and free university fees. Life was pretty easy. We were able to get into properties fairly cheaply. Negative gearing, we'd be able to put a lot of money into a number of properties. Now, the only thing about that, our cohort, there's around about 5 million of us. I'm the back end. I'm someone who's never going to retire. I've sold my business a couple of times and retired, and it's a pretty boring life, unfortunately. So I'll be around here for at least another 15 years if you guys will have me. So we'll see how we go. The big one, though, is they talked about the quiet resignation in COVID. It wasn't quiet. It was simply the baby boomers were moving out of the workforce. They'd done pretty well in their super. Their property investments were shooting up through the roof. So they all packed it up for the day and said, well, this is pretty good. I'm going to live off this for the rest of my life. The problem about that, because there's quite a sizable cohort there, the number of people who are working for every person who's over age 65 is rapidly decreasing. Have a look at 1975 to 2015. If you have a look now, we're around about we're probably about 3.5 people working for everyone over age 65, and that will continue to increase. So that means there's increased budgetary pressure. If you have a look, the age pension costs the government $53 billion a year. The healthcare card is quite, obviously they've extended that out, is quite expensive as well. NDIS is creating a huge budget blowout as everyone expected it to. NBN, gosh, what a waste of money that ended up being. But the question is that, we've got Albanese, who's also a baby boomer. Once that mantle is handed down, and we're going to get to millennials, what's going to happen there? There's going to have to be significant changes to the budgets. A couple of things here from the Grattan Institute, which is, again, Labor, it's a fairly left-leaning policy think tank. Grattan Institute, one there, we've got the intergenerational transfer tax. You can see on the left an IGTT, income tax swap could also boost disposable income for young people. Now, do you think millennials will want that? Absolutely. For example, if all inheritances above $500,000 were taxed at 20% and the revenue is to fund income tax cuts, most people under 50 would be ahead financially. And of course, that is coming to pass. I mean, the very nature of this $3 million proposal I'll talk about shortly is right on that track. Grattan Institute also have come out and said basically that we should be broadening the superannuation death benefits tax so that a current 15% tax to adult children is not enough, and it should be up around about 30 to 40%. The other side is we have a look there, the Greens Treasury spokesman, we're talking about the 3 million cap. They want it down at 1.9 billion so we can have rent assistance. So again, there's a lot of pressure on the underlying budgetary. And of course, we saw at the SMSF Association conference last week, the Assistant Treasurer, Jones, basically said that the superannuation is a honeypot. And of course, Winnie the Pooh loves his honey. How did we get here? It's quite interesting. Originally, for Regulation 621, had mandatory drawdowns. For that, a mandatory drawdown occurred obviously on death, so you couldn't leave money in superannuation funds on death, and that still remains. The other side of the equation was that up until 2007 with Simple Super, that another mandatory drawdown was age 65. So at age 65, you either had to take a lump sum or a pension. In those days, it was an allocated pension, which effectively meant you had a minimum balance like we did at the moment, which was 4% and a maximum, say, 10%. That 10% obviously was rested away. And I would generally expect that we'll end up probably going back to those pension valuation factors. But those factors by themselves were designed such that the pension ran out effectively by around about age 86, 87. So if that was in play for these large balances, like if you had $5 million, then a minimum balance of, if you're under age 65, effectively would be 4% of $5 million. You'd have to take $200,000. Likewise, as you got up to around about 80, 85, where you got a 9% or a 10% or even if 95, 11% drawdown, you'd virtually be pulling a large amount of your money out of the system. Now, if they wanted that, it's probably best off going that. I'm not sure why they've gone down this $3 million addition to another set of tax administration. They could have easily gone back to originally what it was at 621 and get people to draw out more money from their superannuation. Again, there's no tax liability on it, so it's not a big issue. Now, by taking that off, and when it did come out in Simpler Super and 621, I said right at that stage, it's probably the best estate planning vehicle going around. I would hesitate to probably say it can be or cannot be. You can see this is from the government's or the Treasury's retirement incomes paper. And it came out in, I think it was 2021. And you can see the size of projected value of superannuation death benefits. So that great idea of taxing them further is obviously going to take on. Things could be worse. I don't know if you saw this. A Yale professor said for Japan that a mass suicide could effectively solve Japan's ageing population issue, because they're basically at the moment, they're one person over 65 for one person working, or it's coming up, I think, by 2030 or 2035. Now, it is obviously pretty controversial, forced euthanasia, but at least we're not at that stage yet. But obviously, he's got a bit of kudos. Okay, let's go and have a look at the super balance proposals. I was watching Karl Stefanovic and the two politicians the other day, and God, they had no idea. First one is that accruals taxation is not something that's not in Australia. It was put in place in Australia for controlled foreign corporations and controlled foreign trusts, essentially where businesses were using companies and trusts in tax haven. And what would happen is the income between one year and another was brought to account on an accruals basis and taxed in Australia. So if it was controlled over in Bahamas and you could show that, then any increase in the underlying wealth of that company or that trust was essentially brought to account and taxed. I think it was at just a normal level. So it's been around, and gosh, I remember doing big papers and submissions on that when I was at KPMG. Now, they've obviously pulled this in for the funds, and having looked through, I think it's interesting the way it's played out is that Treasury is on that underlying assumption that for industry funds, everything's done by member account balances. It's very difficult for industry-based funds, unless they segregate members' accounts, and which would create way too much administration to try and allocate taxable income to a specific person's account once they're over $3 million was just going to be way too tough. So it's easy to bring in members' balances. Now, when you apply that into a self-managed super fund sphere, obviously that's quite radical. Ideally for us, it would just be based on taxable income, that proportion that relates to a member's balance over over $3 million, which is essentially much the same as applies to a life insurance company. So you can actually lift a lot of the life insurance company concepts and put them into self-managed super fund, which they did originally when you had your segregated pension assets and also accumulation. So it's already been in there. Now we're just going to add an extra one, but that then puts a puzzle back to the industry funds, because if it's self-managed super funds taxable income and industry funds don't have got member benefits, then member accrued balances, then it means anyone who's got the $3 million isn't ever going to be an industry fund. You're better off in a self-managed super fund. Ideally, it'd be good to have two systems, but I'm not sure we're going to get that. Now, there's a lot of squealing about it, but again, going back and having a look at effectively the way it's come out, the people who are doing it tough, they don't mind seeing people with $3 million in super, because they assume they've got lots of houses and all that sort of stuff being taxed extra, and that seems to be what the polling is. And even if it's not, they're going to tell you that anyway. Essentially, though, what we've put in place is a superannuation wealth tax. So I call it hashtag super wealth tax, because essentially we're looking at our member balance in 1 year, we're looking at the increase in the underlying value, that is the increase in the wealth from in 1 year, and then we're subjecting it to tax. Now, mind you, it's only going to be that proportion that relates to that. So if I, for example, if I start off and I got $4 million at the start of the year and I go to $5 million, that's $1 million in wealth. Now, what will happen is that's not all taxed at 30%. I have to look at that $1 million in wealth, and because it's gone down, I think it's going to be because I had 4 out of 5, 20% of that $1 million or $200,000 is going to be taxed at 30%. So that's the way they're going to make it work. I think I just have to go and check that proportionality, whether it's on the 4 or whether it's the 5. But that's essentially have a look at it. Treasury paper, I'll also slide that in here as well, just so you can have a look, because I've got a couple of fairly simple examples. Where they go to, I'm not quite sure, but it essentially means that, one, I feel sorry for the administrators. Secondly, feel sorry for the auditors, because it's going to put a lot of pressure on the auditors to ensure that valuations are on top. And of course, I feel sorry for the Australian Taxation Office as well, because once that wealth goes in, again, it's another element where you're going to be able to draw down. Either the tax is paid personally by the individual, or you can withdraw money from your superannuation fund from that. So there's a lot to go through. And as I said before, I'm not sure how it's going to apply on death. Obviously on death, if there's that final year, I want to talk about a little bit later on, but we can have a position where if an estate is open for 2 to 3 years and it's above that $3 million, that money is going to actually be deemed to be earned or accrued and earned by the executor of the estate. So again, there's a whole lot of issues there as well, and you'd want to make sure, if this was the case, that you want to not wind up, but you pay out member balances really quickly. Okay, so let's go and have a look here for a couple of things. Big warning there. Do you trust the government? Have a look at the age-based deduction limits for concessional contributions. In fact, it was, I did over 55s, but it's actually over 50s, was $100,000. And that was in 2007. Now it's down at 27,500. It was originally put up at a high level for over 50s because it was assumed a lot of people wanted, play catch up. But now it just keeps on being whittled away. There's some people who even want to reduce it further if you have a look at the greens, etc. Section 293, many of you probably may have dealt with that in the past. Obviously, it doesn't apply to excess concessional, but applies to just that 27,500 when it goes into the system. And that's an additional 15%. Now, that was originally based on your $300,000 of taxable income plus super contributions. As I said, excess concessional is excluded. but now that's dropped down to 250. And it was floated of going down to, I think, $200,000 or 225. So everything that always starts up high is guaranteed to come down low. The only thing that hasn't is the transfer pension balance, which was indexed. I'm sure that people, the government probably hated it being indexed. And now my indexation, well, my expectation is that the cap is not indexed. The TBC is, or the transfer balance cap, or TPB, that is increased over time. I would say that, we're probably going to be looking at $3 million coming down. We don't want to be like the Greens who say it actually should be 1.8 million. But over time, it'll probably come down at maybe 2.3, 2.4. And over that time, your pension transfer balance will go up. So you'll end up with a bona fide retirement income system anyway. So we're going to be right back at the start. So what we need to do is obviously we need to look at SMSFs and look at them a bit differently. So I just want to give you my view, and I want to go through quite a few strategies around that, what I would be doing. We've got a question here from Ron. Thank you, Ron. Many people say it's my money. Yes, it is. And there are tax incentives to forego income now for later retirement and no tax on retirement. If people and politicians want young people to have access to the CBA fund a home deposit, simply the SGC is locked into retirement, allow extra contributions. Well, there's the 10.5% of the capital, not any earnings. Yeah, look, I think that's a really good idea, Ron. You're going to see, I believe the first home savers system was really good because you could put in, a parent could get a child working in their trust, put in some concessional contributions, so it's a tax deduction. In a couple of years, you'll be able to pull that out, $50,000 to use as a deposit. But I guarantee that'll go. None of these changes to super. Once they started to say that super is for dignity, it suddenly means that you're in a war where if you argue against it, like for example, if you're arguing now against this, then effectively you're arguing against people's dignity or the general dignity of Australia. So this is, I believe the superannuation system, which now costs more than the age pension, will have quite radical changes. But when you're coming in with industry fund goggles, those changes are going to effectively be at that self-managed super fund level. Although they talk about it's all a super, if you listen to them, everyone is really smashing SMSFs. So it's something we're going to have to wear. And I know that SMSF Association is, obviously out there talking about it, which is fantastic. Great thing for the new El Presidente or the new CEO to come in, Peter Burgess. But let's see what happens there. I've got a completely different way of thinking about things. At the end, superannuation is always going to be a long-term vehicle to compound savings. But obviously there's issues there around getting money out. They've already said that they're virtually going to knock out everything whereby you can access your money early. And that seems to be smart because obviously industry funds, if you think of it with those things, the longer people are in the system, not accessing lump sums on a retirement income. So you've got your SGC in at age 20 and you might not, access it until age 70 or 80. That's a long time the industry funds service the system. So they're going to always look at it like that compared to, for example, us as SMSFs. So you need to put your industry fund services on and think about what's going on. SMSFs have got great asset protection from a bankruptcy perspective. They're completely, your bankruptcy or trustee in bankruptcy can't access that money. Obviously, you can't be a member of SMSF if you're bankrupt, so you have to put your money into industry fund services or industry funds for a short period of time. But even if you are retired, you can live off lump sums rather than income streams, and any lump sum is also not taken into account, even though you're retired if you're bankrupt. So it's great for asset protection. And a well-designed family super funds built in succession, which I want to go through and I want to have a look. Estate planning is always is part of an SMSF strategy game. But if you have a look with the $3 million cap or the $3 million new tax threshold, the super wealth tax, plus the potential of adult tax rates going a lot higher, then, we really need to start to think, well, probably it's not the best place to have our estate planning. So we simply leave our transfer pension balances inside our self-managed superannuation fund, and anything else we pull out if we're able to do, obviously, if we're met a condition of release. So I want to talk about that one. The other one is we're getting, obviously, it's nice to see so much sitting in superannuation for estate planning. But generally, obviously, another element that we look at, SAPEPAA, is family provisions. And I did quite did a 2-hour webinar on that with Tony Anamoulis for our SAPEPAA members. That's just part of their CPD, which is included in their membership. Essentially, we went through all the family provisions, and the latest stats show that 50% of all estates are effectively contested under family provision across Australia, and generally around about 76% on average are successful. So to put superannuation into an estate means there's a danger, 1 and 2, every time you do that through a BDBN or an SMSF will, effectively you're really being extremely dangerous, particularly if you don't tell the client that there may be a family provisions claim made against that superannuation money, compared to if it's paid directly out from the superannuation fund, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. In fact, a couple of very large legal firms were sued recently because they didn't notify the client it was going to be a family provisions claim. So again, it's going to be quite significant. In this Ellisall case, which just came out a couple of weeks ago, in this one, again, I don't know why they did it, but they let a lawyer, the executor, ended up making himself the trustee of the fund on the death of the sole member of that fund. It took 3 years. They ended up going to the Supreme Court because they couldn't find deeds. The BDBN that they had, and again, I'm not sure why people use BDBNs, but the BDBN that they had fell to pieces. They ended up going through that, but 3 years down the track before you could actually make a payment out of that fund. So that's, again, because that was subject to a family provision claim. So you've got to be extremely careful around that one. So SAPEPAA, as I said before, if you want to, do the course, and then you can go and get this little board certified SAPEPAA thing. So what we do, and I think that's indicative, if you want to go down that track, and really you can't just be an SMSF specialist advisor, because that's becoming a narrower and narrower field. SMSF administration, absolutely, go for broke, and your fees are going to have to go up after this. I can guarantee that, as will audit fees. But if you want to take a bigger look at things, essentially this is what a good SAPEPAA advisor will ask a client: is how important is it to you to protect your family wealth, your bloodline for generations to come? And if they say it's critical or it's really important, then you go and start to build structures for them. So many of you are accountants, and so we're going to have a look through what the ideal structure is, and then I want to go and have a look at a couple of strategies around that. I'll just go through and have a look at some of the questions. So Cecil, great to see you, Cecil. When they talk about costing, cost this, they don't talk about the age pension. But again, we're looking at, Cecil, if you were in the industry superannuation funds, you would do exactly the same. So you build a narrative, and then what we're doing is we're and you saw, I don't know if you saw that presentation the other day, where people were actually mocking people who got more than $3 million in super. So if you meet a condition of release and you're retired, can you not be tackled in bankruptcy? No, you can't. Sorry, Cecil, if you're taking a pension, absolutely, because it's the same as salary and wage income. But if you have lump sums, no, you cannot take any money out of that fund. That's Section 116. is exempt under the Bankruptcy Act, which is fantastic. John Stitt, due to the TBC $1.6 million plus, auditors have an issue with the correct valuation of some assets. Absolutely. Now, don't you think that's going to get even worse, John, around that? But again, the guys who are, the valuers at Industry Fund Service or Industry Funds, not sure how that's placed. The costs, I know you'll do that. Unfortunately, I showed you all the lead up. Don't worry about the narrative. It's going to happen. These things, superannuation or particularly the high-end SMSFs are going to get a lot worse. Christopher, the reason I talk about a B2BN, because I can name probably about 20 cases where they've fallen down. My preference is an SMSF will that gets tied into the deed. And again, if you want to do I've seen a couple of major law firms, SMSF deeds, they call it binding directions or binding death benefit agreements, and that's tied into the deed with a specific form for that. So again, for example, I'm dealing with one at the moment for a client. It's a B2BN, but it was signed in 2017. But when you have a look at the deed says that it has to apply the rules under SIS Regulation 617A, which doesn't apply to self-managed super funds, but the deed has actually made it do that. The problem about that, the client's died, but because it applies to 617A, that has a 3-year time period. So that B2BN they did before is completely out of it. So unless, look, don't besmirch, have a look if you know what your deed is and what you're doing. A B2BN would be fantastic if you know exactly how it's tied in and you make sure you meet all the criteria. I built a SMSF will into the LightYear docs and the Abbott and Mourly deed because I know it ties in exactly with that deed. And again, just don't get caught out from it. Particularly, one of the issues in that case that I was talking about, Ellisel, was that the accountant did the binding death benefit nomination, and the court basically said that probably they shouldn't have. They should have got legal advice on that. So Alex, this grey slide, I'll put it in as a JPEG for you. A lot of SAPEPAA advisors get these done up, not 6x4, but A3 sides, get them adhesive from Officeworks and put them around the boardroom for the client. Okay, so let's go on. This is what I call my ideal structure. Obviously, clients have got assets in their own name. And for that, you're going to do will with testamentary trust and obviously enduring powers of attorney. I would never do a standard will. It's just too dangerous from a family law and an asset protection point of view. All wills should automatically have testamentary trusts. And again, that comes from asset protection. Now, of course, it doesn't matter if we have a testamentary trust. A family provisions always come first before the executor can ever deal with anything. As I said in the Ellisel case, it's taken 3.5 years because of a family provisions claim before the executor can even pay out 1 cent. So with a 1 in 2 chance of any estate being challenged, we've got to look at how to meaningfully make sure that our client's family wealth is protected, but continues on. It's not much good having family wealth locked away for 3 or 4 years if no one can, get any money from it, because you're not allowed to take it. So let's have a look through here. The leading member trust is a discretionary trust that I built many years ago. Essentially, the only beneficiaries are the leading member and obviously their lineal descendants or their bloodline. So there is no named beneficiary, which has happened to work out very well because of Owi's case. In Owi's case, down in Victoria last year, if you've seen it, essentially a lot of people, when you come into 30 June, you need to take into account all named beneficiaries' financial positions in order to make distributions. So you need accountants, everyone. So what we've done, the leading member trust, you have a line of succession, different generations. So you have a leading member appointor, then a successor, second successor. So it just carries on down the track. We've got a special leading member corporate trustee for that. And there's a number of reasons for that I won't go into. I just want to get to where we're going to. But that's essentially to make sure that the shares here never go into the estate, so the family provisions lawyer can't get tied up. Now, for the leading member trust, you'll generally may own the trading company But over the other side, we have a family protection trust, which is where all our major wealth is collected. So, for example, if I've got a trading company, I'll probably have a license agreement with the family protection trust. So I've got a bucket company here, but I might have an asset company. And essentially what we do is we license those services, or the use of those services, goodwill, marketing, etc., back to that trading company to keep it pretty bleak. So what we're doing there is if we get sued, there's not much sitting in there. Over the family protection trust, we're going to have a bucket company. As I said, well, it might end up with an asset protection company sitting in here. So that one would have a different corporate rate. The bucket company, if it's just simply investments, the current tax rate is 25%. So it's 25%. So family protection trust, if it gets income, will then be able to obviously distribute down to the bucket company, and it can pay out straight away. And the thing is, if it's paid out, it comes out with franked dividends, which is fantastic. So that can be then distributed to the next generation. So look, there's a whole lot of lines here. These family protection trusts we set up go multi-generational. So when mum and dad pass away, it splits. So each child has a sub-trust in there, and they would have a proportional number of shares in that bucket company, and they can distribute it as they see fit. Leading member SMSF, which I'm going to talk about very shortly, but essentially with that $3 million or whatever, I would, one is obviously we need to start pulling some of our wealth. And right from the very start, I always said that it's just crazy for people to run an accumulation side anyway, mainly because if they pass away and both mum and dad pass away together, there can be a huge estate planning tax impost, because it's not only the 15 or 17% coming out on the taxable contributions, but also if you have to realise the underlying capital gains, it can be real strife. So here, what I would expect for you as a strategy is over time, pulling money out tax-free out of the leading member SMSF or your SMSF, putting it into a family protection trust, investing it in there. So it's the same sort of investments if you want there, properties or whatever. And then the income would then be distributed, can either be distributed by way of a loan to other family members. And the reason you do that is from a family law perspective, because it's all about family wealth protection asset. But then going down to the bucket company, obviously it's taxed at 25%. We've got that multi-generational, so it ends up being a very good estate planning tool. And also we can start to minimise our tax on that. So rather than 30% on wealth, we're only going to be paying 25% on taxable income. Now, of course, when we distribute from the Family Protection Trust, we're not going to distribute capital gains down here. We're going to distribute, obviously, income. Capital gains would either go directly to individuals or somewhere else. So that is what I call the ideal structure. We've got a couple of other, we've got probably half a dozen strategies to clean that up even further, which is pretty important. So have a look at, as I said, the SMSF deed is the king. If you'd like to get a copy of, I think if you log in, get a free login for LightYear Docs, I will send you out these slides. I will send you out this recording. I'll also send you out my book, The Guide to SMSF Trustees and Strategy Review. Go and have a look at that. The question before around the B2BNs, that's the absolute crucial one. And likewise with investment strategies. But B2BNs, you need to make sure they tie in absolutely correctly. Have a look at Ellisall. That took 3.5 years of the Supreme Court to actually find out around that B2BN. I'm going to show you a different strategy for that. So leading member, again, this is this line of succession. We've got Charles, we've got William, George, Charlotte, Louis. So that with a line of succession, this could be a leading member, a discretionary trust or family protection appointors, or inside an SMSF. Now, the way we do it a bit differently, we're only allowed to have 6 members in a self-managed super fund. So that's one thing that the coalition got right before it handed over or ceded power to the industry fund Labor Party. But the problem is it doesn't make sense to have everyone everyone can be a member, provided their bloodline, but they don't need to be a director. So if you've got an enduring power of attorney is like a proxy directorship. So in this instance, what we could have here, you've got Charles, and then if you start to play it down, if you had Kate in there or you had Camilla in there, effectively they could be members, but you don't have them as directors. So Camilla would give her proxy directorship to Charles, which is essentially an EPOA, and on the LightYear doc system, you can do a special purpose EPOA, and then you're off and running. So the leading member trust or the leading member SMSF is essentially for bloodline members only. And unless there's a specific exemptions, for example, Camilla, but preference is not to do that. And then the effectively the trustee or the directors of the trustees. So you might, in this instance, you'd have two, one being Charles and one being William. That in that instance, they can't pay out benefits unless it is going to bloodline, which is absolutely crucial when we come around to having a look at the next element. Deductible contributions is really important. I want to just go through something here. All contributions are deductible. Most of you guys know that anyway from employer and self-employed. And obviously they're all taxable contributions inside the fund. Now, what I want to do is I just want to, most of you are pretty well aware that any amount over $27,500 is added back to the members' assessable income for the year in which the contribution is credited to the member's account, not when it's actually put into the fund, when it's credited to the member's account. So, for example, if I got a bonus or Ben got a bonus, or for the last 6 months I've been able to live off something, and so I'm not taking any salary, I'm paying it all into the fund. It's going to be a taxable contribution to the fund, assessable income, and the fund's going to pay tax of 15% on that. Depends on what the fund's invested in, of course. You might have ESIC tax benefits or tax offsets. You might have imputation credits, so on and so forth. But the way it works is that if I put this in on the 1st of June 2023, then I've got a tax deferral. So what now is inflation? We've currently got inflation running at 7%. If you have a look, Bank of America's put out a study, I think it's all the major OECD nations, that says that once you're over a 5% inflation rate, in the past, how long it's taken to get it down there, down to 2%. In Australia, it's 10 to 12 years. So we're going to live with an inflationary environment for quite some time, it looks. So the main thing, though, is if I put the $70,000 in on the 1st of June, I'm going to have to pay tax on that $42,500. So that's added back to my assessable income. So I'll lodge my tax return. The commission will come back and say, you've got to amend your assessment, add this additional $42,500. You'll pay tax at that time, but you get a 15% tax offset. So if the $42,500 was my only income, obviously I'm not going to be paying any tax. The main thing is there is no penalties. There used to be a penalty interest rate, but there are no penalties. So that's effectively gone. So for me to go over my caps, one is there's no tax. That I might end up doing a tax saving depending on what the underlying tax rates are inside the fund, but there are no tax penalties. So it's not a Part 4A because I'm going to be paying exactly the same amount of tax. So that's one benefit. But plus I've deferred my tax payment, potentially rather than paying PAYG, for maybe 12, 15 months, depending on whether I'm, when I get that assessment from the tax office. And the main thing about that is essentially I'm not going to have to pay tax. Inflation's working for me. So I'm actually saving the money I'm paying when I pay it out is obviously of lesser value than the money now. So I'd rather have the money now rather than later on down the track. Anything that goes above that $42,500, I can also pull out. When the commissioner amends my assessment, I can actually pull out 85% of that. So I'm putting it in and then I'll be able to get it later on. Now, if you use the suspense account, and the commissioner's got the whole lot of rulings on this, but on the 1st of June 2023, if I put it in, that $42,500, instead of getting credited to my account, I put it up into a suspense account, and then it gets credited in July, which is required under 7.02 of the SIS regs. That means it's credited next year, so I'm not going to have to pay tax on it until June 2025 at the very earliest. So I've got a couple of years of inflation break there from my contributions. So again, go down the track and have a look at it from your client's perspective, because again, it's probably one of the only real games in town at the moment. If you want, there's a whole lot of contributions. Again, I will send out to you with this session. I've got the ATO guide to super contributions. What I've done is just taken everything the commissioners issued around contributions from the website, from other papers, from his contribution ruling, and put them all into one booklet. So it's a great guide. I mean, you don't necessarily need to listen to me. So, a lot of the strategies I get all come from the commissioners. So go and have a look at what the commissioners said there. Superannuation estate planning. When we have a look, we've got member accumulation. If it ends up in accumulation, then as I said before, if it goes over to the estate, it's going to be subject to family provision. You cannot, if you're doing a BDBN to the estate for the client, you must do due diligence on their estate to see if there's a family provision claim, because if they put it over there, and it's usually what will happen, like if mum and dad both pass away, what's going to happen if you're going to go down that track? Because if you don't, then you're going to have to prove, there's potentially a negligence action if you don't tell your client there might be a family provision claim. Now, with a family protection trust, absolutely, you don't have to worry about that because that's excluded from a family provision claim. Commence a pension. Obviously, you can do that later on down the track. So member pension, we can set up a member dependent pension. From the accumulation account, we can actually pay directly into a testamentary trust. So it doesn't go over to the estate. If it's going to a dependent, and a dependent under the SIS Act, which is adult children, and I'll look at grandchildren very shortly, or spouses, they can pull the money out and then put it into a testamentary trust where minors are taxed as adults. So that's a specific tax provision. Most estate planning lawyers, aren't aware of that, aren't even aware that you can pay directly out to dependents into a trust. But our SMSF will covers that. Again, why don't I recommend BDBNs? Mainly because I've never seen a BDBN that actually covers this. Another important strategy here for you is that if you are doing SMSFs, you'll need in that BDBN, or certainly we have it in the SMSF will, that you are the person who's actually going to manage the SMSF estate on death. Again, there's quite a bit of administration. We're about to release next week the flow chart and the minutes for what to do on the death of a member, and that'll be available on the LightYear Doc site, and it's only $129. So if you're a subscriber, then it's just included as part of your package. But again, that's absolutely crucial to how to administer an SMSF estate. And you'll generally be, it should be around about $20,000 to $40,000 of fees there. So that's absolutely crucial. And again, just have a blanket BDBN without all these other bells and whistles is just crazy. I've got 5 more minutes. SMSF will, if you want, I'll actually send you through, if you remind me, Chris, we'll send through a sample of an SMSF will. But in the SMSF specialist course, also our SAPEPAA course, we go through and show you how to build one of these as well. As I said before, reversion pensions have precedence, but as the accountant or planner, you become the administrator of the estate rather than the lawyer, because the lawyers will just generally throw everything over the estate, which will be subject to potential family provisions claim. Intergenerational estate planning. My preference is always for an auto-reversionary pension rather than going back and dealing everything in accumulation stage. The reason I say that, and there's been a number of articles around this, is that when we have an auto-reversion pension, if I die and I've got a pension, the next month it gets paid out to my spouse. So there's immediate monies there. If you have a look at that Ellisor case, if we've put in there a BDBN that a pension is going to be paid to my spouse on my death, then if you're at Ellisor, that could take 3 years down the track. Likewise, it could take 6 months. If you're paying a lump sum or a pension, you can only pay out a rental lump sum, then a final lump sum. So you only get 2 chances under the law to pay out lump sums. So it's very, very difficult to manage the cash flow needs of the family that's going on. So how can you be protecting your family's wealth and also their sanity if you're actually putting it into this system, which is actually preventing you taking cash, that's your cash, your family's cash out of the system? So as I said, Ellisor took 3 years. auto reversion pension, because it goes from one person to another, with potentially the exception of the notional estate inside New South Wales. It's not going to be caught up in a family provisions claim because it's essentially gone to the next person. And we can actually do intergenerational, so it can go to dad to mum and then to our adult children. Now, the adult children can't receive it by way of a pension, but they can put it into an SMSF death benefits trust, a testamentary trust. And the base for that is a family protection trust. So we can use a very similar system and build these family protection testamentary trusts that are only for bloodline into that system again. So all this starts to really add value for what you can do for your client that is well and truly out of the ordinary. If you've got grandkids who've got school fees being paid, there's quite a few PBRs that will show that those grandchildren are financially dependent on their grandparents, which means if they're financially dependent at the time of death, then essentially they can be left with the pension. And if grandparents had tax-free pension, then the kids are going to get tax-free pension as well. It doesn't stop at age 25 because that limitation is only for children, not for grandchildren. So I really love that auto reversionary. I just use it all the time. I find that's the preference way to go. Accumulation, as I said before, is great, but the danger about that is accessing monies. The second one is getting caught in a family provisions claim that lasts quite a long time, and more importantly, going down the track is. We just don't know what the tax is going to be on those accumulation as we go down the track. That's about it. Let me just go through some of the questions. So if we go down, okay, Alex, I'll do those slides. Land, yeah, this will be recorded and all the slides. So with the bucket company, Liam, well done, obviously. We're going to have to work out if it's a base rate entity. So the bucket company, you may well be right. If so, then the tax rate is probably going to be, 30%. So we need to look at whether it's a base rate company or not. So thank you again for that, Liam. From Gary, can shares in an unlisted private company owned by a discretionary family trust be transferred to an SMSF? The SMSF actually paid for the transfer of the shares at the market value. Yes and no. So if it's a private company, you'll find that it won't be an in-house asset, provided that there's no other entities, so no other investments like shares and unit trusts in there. There's no borrowings. Then as long as it meets the conditions of 1322C, you can actually sell those private company shares subject to the investment strategy in the deed into the SMSF. And obviously it has to be at market value, but there's a specific exclusion in section 66(2)(a) for that. Again, if you've got any of these sort of questions, please feel free to just jump on to LightYear Docs if you've got an account, and then you can jump on to, we've got a direct link with Abbott and Mourly, which is our legal firm. The legal firm, we handle questions like that. That's part of your subscription. And if it's quite a difficult one, then what we'll do is we'll come back and tell you what we need in terms of advice.
And just quickly on this,
yep.
Yeah, just quickly on this, Grant, just thank you so much for today's session. Very informative. And it was so interesting being at the SMSF Association. I asked Grant in the morning on day one, what will be the biggest change in super? And you called this that day. We did a video on it before it was announced. You already had the solution with the Family Protection Trust ready to go for the clients. And that's why we've created LightYear Docs. There's 280 documents there for accountants. And we're actually only seeing most accountants, which I'd say 95%, are only focusing on things like company setups, trusts, a little bit in super, and maybe some trust distributions and loan agreements. Now, there are a lot of documents from the beginning that you should be thinking of for your clients, like succession, at the beginning and not at the end. And a lot of your documents right now need to be updated. You've got to re-strategize and re-educate your whole team. And when I talk about re-education, that's why we've created the LightYear training group. There are 45 types of trusts that we've created for you. Most accountants aren't reading their current trusts. when they pick up a client that has an existing trust, not updating those trusts or super funds or constitutions. So now's the time to get your house in order, to go back to your clients, get these documents updated to the latest changes, educate your whole team on all of these new strategies, because right now with all these changes, you need to be ahead of the market, not behind it. And that's why we've come up with the Succession Asset Protection Association as well. But also we've got a webinar on Thursday, another free one around asset protection and PPSR strategies as well for you. So make sure you register this Thursday. But if you are not a member, please feel free to reach out to me direct at ben@lightyeardocs.com.au. We're offering the special offers that we're doing at the Accounting Business Expo next week. Grant will be speaking at, and I will be speaking.
So make sure you come along and say hello to us.
Yeah, and if you don't want to go to the ABE one, I'm sure a lot of you will be going to the Accountex. Me and Grant are doing day one of ABE and getting on a plane that night to go to Accountex and swapping with the rest of the team. So we'll be at both of them. So make sure you come and say hello. But if you can't make it, please reach out to me direct. I'll do a one-on-one session on how to grow your business and implement these strategies, and make sure you just keep jumping onto these sessions. Even if you can't make it, just register. We will send you the recording, all the materials that you need to do. So if you need to do it at a different time, because I know there are a lot of webinars going on at the moment to keep up to date. But please join us on those sessions. But Grant, have you got anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, look, there's still quite a few people on, so I'm happy to. This is probably, if you want to jump off, you can jump off now. But if anyone's got any questions at all around SMSFs or estate planning, or this is a chance to jump on and get your questions answered, or you just want to say hello, so I'm happy to stay on for another 10 or 15 minutes. For that one is also for SAPEPAA. I caught up with quite a few financial planners at the SMSF Association conference last week. And after having a chat with them, a lot of them are now starting to see the light that in this SAPEPAA space, we saw that obviously SMSFs are going to go up to 2 trillion. But when it comes around to asset protection estate planning, we're dealing with, by that stage, a $7 to $8 trillion market. There's a huge opportunity there for all of us to provide really high quality advice. It really takes me back to when I first started SMSFs. It was a very niche area. There weren't many advisors around there. And now it's become, very, I suppose, administration driven. Unfortunately, I pity the administrators once their system gets in. And essentially now I think there's a really good opportunity for everyone, and I'd encourage everyone to go and do my 3-day SAPEPAA course and then get to SAPEPAA and become an accredited advisor. Jump on sapepa.org.au to see what's happening. But look, I'm happy to take any questions. Otherwise, that's the formal part of the preso from Aldo. Okay, so, so Aldo, I no longer have a tax lawyer that I use for advice. Can you work with firms in Melbourne? Absolutely. So our head office, Abbott and Mourly head office, is down in Melbourne, and we've got a actually brilliant tax lawyer who works with us. He's, the amount of money he saves and issues there. So if you need anything on tax, just contact us. Now, the best thing, Aldo, what we've got is Abbott and Mourly, we've got a system. And I'll get one of my team to get your details. If you just want to put your details in the chat, one of my Abbott Mourly team or one of the Abbott Mourly team, if you can put in the chat how to jump onto our client communications. And I encourage you all, please just go online and feel free to just ask us any technical questions. Now, if it ends up that you want a PBR or you need advice or whatever, we'll just give you a quote for it. So again, that's part of our system. We've now got 10 lawyers on board. Absolutely. So Mark, you did the SAPEPAA course in Christmas. Look, we've got one advisor who's done the course 5 times. Every time you look at it, it gets much better. And there's a lot of stuff that we look at in SMSFs. So just contact Chris and Shul from LightYear Training Group. and she'll put her details up there now. And essentially just jump on there. There's no extra cost because you've already done it before. Just jump online. So, Grant, what is the Act reference for pension to devolve into a testamentary trust? That's a good point, Cecil. So one is 621 and 622 is the SIS regulations. Now, when we come round to that, because we can pay out to a dependent, the definition of dependent is obviously anyone who's a financial dependent or an adult child under the SIS Act. So you'll find that definition is in section 10.1 of the SIS Act. Now, from that perspective is then if we go into section 102AG of the Income Tax Assessment Act, you'll find there that any trust that has been created with superannuation benefits, so that's directly, and the same with life insurance, effectively is accepted from the penalty rates of tax for minors. So unfortunately, not many lawyers are aware of that, but that's the relevant sections for that one. Himanshu, a lovely name. Hi, Grant. One of my clients does not have any family dependents in Australia. We've set up a protector. Can we nominate as a successor director? Are you looking? You can nominate overseas people as well if you want as the definitely as the appointors and the directors. Preferable to have someone here. Now, in the Elsall case, as I said before, the lawyer stepped in. You can step in if you want, but if they've got a manager or someone here, the main thing is you act, Himanshu, as the person who runs alongside them. That administration of estates is really important. When doing a will or EPOA, how should our tax invoice be worded as accountant? Okay, so when you're basically doing that, the best thing to probably look at, Arthur, is when you're dealing particularly with Abbott and Mourly, you're basically dealing in conjunction with it. So when you're doing invoice, it's just for, if it's coming from us, it can be legal and administrative services in the preparation of a will and also enduring power of attorney. If you want, send something to us. Again, jump on to the Abbott and Mourly, communications channel. And then what we can do is we'll come up with an example there for you, Arthur. Really good question. Gary, is there an easy way to make a bucket company a base rate entity without invoking Part 4A, so there's no differential in the tax rate when franked dividends are distributed? I'll have to take that one on notice, Gary, but I'll definitely come back to you. But you can start to see the benefit, whether it's a 25 or 30% rate. If you go inside a superannuation fund, you're paying a 30% rate on your net wealth, that 30% rate is gone. Whereas if you've got that going down into a company, you're paying a 30% rate, then it means the end beneficiaries, which are going to be the next generation, they're going to at least get those franking credits, which is important. So that's why I think the Family Protection Trust is a lot stronger than the accumulation style. Even if you have a look at the 15%, because the 15%, once you pay, you don't get credits on it. That's okay, Aldo. Tracy at Next Level Accounting, advice on SMSF. Trace, just jump on. Yeah, if you want that, just jump onto our comms channel, and we'll definitely have a look at it. We get together every couple for a couple of hours every day with all our legal team and go through all our queries. And I get notified. Don't worry, I was up at I think 8 o'clock tomorrow morning doing queries because I've been doing some studies. I don't know why, but anyway. Okay, so Grant, how much of the SAPEPAA advisor accreditation course relevant to SMSF administrator? Look, if you're doing SMSF administration, what I would suggest, Madonna, and again, lovely name, I would probably do my SMSF 101. So that's up and running. Have a chat with Chris. I did that round about, I think, a couple of months ago. I've got another SMSF specialist accreditation course, which I'd highly encourage you to look at, because we go through absolutely everything which is relevant to administration from trusts. We go through the investment strategies, are really crucial. One of the ones you probably don't know, I mean, for the administrators there, investment strategies are absolutely painful. We've spent a lot of work with auditors building our investment strategy to make sure it takes into account everything the Commissioner's got in his guidelines on investment strategies. one thing is if you're utilising our system, and we've got a few administrators, we've got like 1,000 clients, and once you put the investment strategy in the system, let's say you did it last year, or let's say the first time you're doing it is this year. So you put the investment strategy in the system, it's pretty good. As long as the investment strategy is made the same, next year you can just go back to, let's say it's a Smith Super Fund, press a button, it's called Copier, and you can simply copy that to this year's investment strategy. We just simply need to make a change to the date and obviously members' ages, because you need to put in place their ages for investment strategy in order to show retirement income. So again, there's a lot of systems. Same with using trust distribution resolutions. If you've done it last year's and it's in our system, then you can copy and you've got next year, we've got this year's all ready to go. For SAPEPAA, on that one, I would say, Madonna, if you're just going down administration, it's probably not a huge one, but administering estates, absolutely. Matthew, can SMSF buy vacant land and have related party company develop 3 units on behalf of the SMSF? They plan to build 3 units, sell 2, keep 1 for investment purposes. Absolutely. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's going to be the way it's done. Generally, it's going to be by way of a joint venture. One thing you have to watch out is finale around that, and also contributions. There has been musings in the past where the commissioner believes that the increased value of the property may well be a contribution, which I don't feel is the case. But look, Matthew, jump onto the Abbott Mourly app. I'm more than happy to do that. We do private binding rulings. We give advice each and every day, particularly around those sort of structures. George, great to see you, my friend. Absolutely, George. Do the SAPEPAA course as many times as you want, because I will be doing it live in Sydney. So if you want to come along to that one, feel free to do so. But otherwise, that'll be streamed, and that's going to be in April at some stage. So if you've done it before, do it again, because the more times you get it, you're going to actually, honestly, you'll learn a lot more about it. So please feel free to come along for that. It'd be good to see you, George. Gary, also just double checking, can an existing SAPEPAA accredited board certified advisor attend any subsequent SAPEPAA? Yeah, absolutely. So of course you can come along to any accreditation courses. Remember, Gary, we're not like other associations. We also have 3 3-hour sessions, which are part of your membership each year. They're very high level, of course, because, it's only for board certified members. The other one is make sure that you, or anyone here, if you're a SAPEPAA member, that we've got our, from the 7th to the 10th of October, we've got our conference over in Thailand, in Phuket, and it's going to be awesome. So we've got some amazing speakers. But you'll also get to see everyone else. Everyone who had looked at last year loved it. So Samuel, the AM communication channel, where, as has been said, we've just gone through the process with LightYear Docs. They'll be upgrading the site, and in that upgrade, you'll be directly dealing us. There'll be an AM communications channel in the LightYear Docs site. So expect that to come out later today. So I'm looking forward as well. Very exciting. Matthew, look, we're here to help you all the time, because honestly, there's 3,000 pages of SMSF. The government, as I said, as soon as the government made that announcement, I already had the solution, and that's the start. Now we need solutions. You can bitch and moan all you want, but at the end of the day, your clients need a solution now, because they're fearful about what's going on. And again, Family Protection Trust, if you start with the overall concept, but protecting family wealth for your bloodline for generations to come, then you know what you can do with SMSF. Because it doesn't matter whether it's an SMSF, Family Protection Trust, leading member trust, they're all interchangeable. These are your castle, so to speak. Monica, for a leading member SMSF, that's getting a couple of members into the SMSF with special EPA, what happens if the new members were appointed as members of the SMSF before they sign the special EPA? Doesn't matter, Monica. So, for example, I remember in my parents' SMSF, Mum had been a member and a director for a long time. So all she did is, once you got the EPOA, it's then registered, given to the trustee, then she just simply has to remove herself as a director. Now, we've got a very good one inside our EPOAs, which you can do on the LightYear Doc site. You can actually pick a box and it's just a special purpose. Inside the EPOA, just pick a box. It's not for general financial and health. It can just be for superannuation. So that's the way to go. So Daisy, if you've already done the SAPEPAA course once with me, then you can do it as many times as you want. So that's what it is. So it's got nothing to do with SAPEPAA. This is through the LightYear training group, but it's like any of our LightYear training group. If you've already registered for it once, you can do it as many times as you want. So it's not like it's just once and you're gone, because sometimes you honestly, particularly if you're doing the SMSF, you need to watch things 2 or 3 times. And I would expect many of you want to watch this 2 or 3 times as well. It's really crucial. Alex, how close is the PI policy to being released? And should we set up LYD activities in a separate entity? Absolutely. Maybe we could take that offline, Alex, and I could show exactly where I feel it's going. Michael's in discussion, but apparently Tim Munro has got a policy ready to go. So we've suddenly gone from nothing to a whole lot. The SAPEPAA site is also going to change in the next couple of weeks. So we've got LightYear training group. SAPEPAA site is also going to have a front-facing client one, so that clients will get to know a lot more. But look, that's the end of the questions. So look, I really appreciate your time, because I know it's busy. As I said before, this is going to be an absolute nightmare. But let's wait and see what the legislation is. It's going to go to 2025. Just keep in touch with us. We'll let you know straight away. I think, the day after I saw the stuff, I said, look, this is going to be a problem with valuations, with administration. How's what's going to happen on the estate, for example? If you have a look at that case, LSL case, 3 years. 3 years, if it's stuck inside a self-managed super fund, because you can't do anything until all the issues are resolved, then it means suddenly 3 years you're going to be paying extra tax, which you shouldn't have been if you had an auto reversion pension. But again, we're there to help you along the way, which I think is pretty crucial. Thanks, Edmund. Monica, Grant, regarding the special EPOA question, will the SMSF meet the 17A requirements for all members of directors if the special EPOA is signed? Absolutely. Yes. So Monica is at the present point in time. So they could have been a member for 10 years, or they've set a member's application's fine, where they're the director. All they're doing is they're giving them, through the EPOA, their director's proxy to someone else. And look, as we go down the track, many of you got infirm clients. They shouldn't be directors. Look, personally, anyone over age 70, 75, unless they're fairly astute, should not be a director of a self-managed super fund. Let the next generation come in. Okay, I'm going to stop there. And what we'll do is this recording will be out. We're going to get the contributions book to you. We're going to get the contribution of the SMSF trustee book. We're going to get this slides, and we're also going to get obviously the replay of this. But look, for some of you, anyone who's SAPEPAA, the next course will be up in April. I'll let you know what date. We're just trying to coordinate a time with some friends in Sydney. The other side, though, is make sure you get, for anyone who's already done the course, you must do the 2-day advanced estate planning course. Anyway, it's Grant Abbott signing off.